In 1990, Thomas Clancy partnered with Virtus Corporation in North Carolina to create a video game based on his novel SSN. The development of SSN took 6 years, and after its public release in 1996, Tom Clancy and Virtus Studios announced that they would be forming Red Storm Entertainment, named after Clancy's book, Red Storm Rising. Even before their founding in 1996, the development studio already had hundreds of ideas for game development. One of these concepts was about FBI hostage rescue teams, which eventually evolved past just hostage rescue and into more varied and interesting counter-terror scenarios. In a post-mortem article about Rainbow Six, Brian Upton, director of production design at the time, said, quote, "We knew that we wanted to capture the excitement of movies such as Mission Impossible and The Dirty Dozen, the thrill of watching a team of skilled specialists pull off an operation with clockwork precision. We also knew that we wanted it to be an action game with a strong strategic component. A realistic shooter that would be fun to play even without a Quake player's twitch reflexes." Even though Clancy had played a role in discussing the game, it wasn't until it was practically completed that it became a tie-in game for Clancy's newest novel at the time, Rainbow Six. The development team was given a draft of the nearly complete manuscript for Rainbow Six, and they quickly went about adapting the game to fit the plot of the book. Due to the manuscript being unfinished, there are some slight differences in characters and event timelines between the finished novel and the video game. None of these changes make a difference in the finished product, however. Rainbow Six released within the same month as the novel and was met with very positive reviews from both critics and players alike. A few months later, Half-Life would release and revolutionize the FPS genre as a whole, but Rainbow Six had inadvertently spawned a subgenre. Today we're taking a look at Rainbow Six 1998, the very first tactical shooter ever made. Now, the name Rainbow Six itself has a very interesting origin. The story is about a multinational anti-terror team dubbed Rainbow Team. The first half, Rainbow, is in reference to Desmond Tutu and Nelson Mandela, who both used the terms Rainbow People and Rainbow Nation to describe the people and nation of post-apartheid South Africa. The imagery of a rainbow was invoked to describe the diversity of the people protesting the apartheid, and Nelson Mandela's usage of the term Rainbow Nation intended not just to describe the people, but the land as well. Rainbow Team is a multinational organization. Many of you are already probably familiar with this aspect already, since the most recent iteration has by far the most diverse cast of characters that you've no doubt seen in a military shooter. That is the one time I will mention Siege in this video. From this point onward, it's Rainbow Six 1998 and nothing else. The second half of the title, Six, refers to John Clark, the protagonist of the novel and the main person giving you the briefings in-game. Six is John Clark's rank, as in O-6. The rank for a captain in the Navy and Coast Guard, and colonel in every other branch. In the game, John Clark takes a back seat, being reduced to a narrator who lays out the situation for you during the briefing screens. John Clark also stops being relevant to the story of the Rainbow Six gameverse after R6 lockdown. John Clark is genuinely just nowhere to be seen from Vegas and onwards. Rainbow Six itself is one of the most interesting concepts Tom Clancy has ever come up with, in my opinion. A multinational anti-terror organization built on the idea that when an incident involves multiple countries or nations and neither can trust the other to resolve it, they call in a third party. They call in Rainbow. It's a cool idea that has a lot of potential to be explored, and to some extent, most of the Rainbow games do just that. Nearly every single one has you globe hopping to stop super terrorists from doing, well, usually stereotypical terrorist stuff. Rainbow Six 1998 takes place in a, for the time, speculative future, where in the wake of the Cold War, terrorism is on the rise. Rainbow is formed as a solution to this increase of terror, and their first real deployment is a hostage situation involving the Belgian embassy in London. Since the Belgians don't trust the British SAS and the British won't let the Belgians operate on their territory, Rainbow Team is called in to handle the situation. With the world's eyes focused on Rainbow Team, they pull off the operation flawlessly. Now, Rainbow Team's equipment is very of the era. Clearly inspired by events such as the Iranian embassy siege, it's all 90s military hardware, no scopes or lasers here. However, the game does feature some near-futuristic or even sci-fi stuff, such as heartbeat sensors. In fact, there are 2 heartbeat sensors in the game. One is used exclusively to relay enemy positions in the planning phase, and the other is used primarily in stealth missions to see enemies on the minimap, kinda like the Soliton radar from Metal Gear. The joy of this game comes from the focus on strategy first and foremost. Once you select a mission, you're greeted with a briefing screen, which will give you all of the information you need to know about what the area looks like, what the situation is, where you are, why you're there, and also what's going on in the greater narrative. After you figure out your briefing, you can view all of your current intel at that point, including the people and organizations you've encountered so far, as well as the news reports about previous missions. Next is your roster. You get a whopping 8 slots, which is more slots than nearly any other game of its kind. Each character on the roster has 10 different stats that will determine how effective they are at any given scenario. What any of these mean exactly? I have no idea. Okay, actually I found the game manual, which explains all of these. Aggression dictates their behavior when they snap, and self-control dictates how likely they are to snap in high-stress situations. Low aggression would make the character freeze, while a high aggro stat might make them go on the offensive. Leadership buffs teamwork and self-control stats when the character is a team leader, stamina is equivocally health, and the rest are specialized skills that do exactly what they say. Each character in the roster has a role, such as Assault or Demolitions, which means that they have specific stats that are higher than the others. For example, an Assault role character will be better with guns, whereas a Demolitions character will have a higher Explosives stat and will defuse bombs faster. These named characters you start off with can die, and when they do, they're gone for the rest of a playthrough. You can get reserve characters to replace anyone killed in action, which still gain better stats based on their role, but will always be worse than a named character. Near the end of my playthrough, I had a team mostly comprised of reserve characters, and since they start off terrible and don't improve much with each mission success, I decided that they were expendable and started to recruit rush missions. You can't do it in Siege anymore, but you can still do it in the original trilogy. Once you've got your roster and your equipment ready, you slot your roster into teams and enter the planning menu. Rainbow Six's planning menu is simultaneously leagues ahead of its time and archaic as hell. Rainbow Six 1998's planning menu is so robust and in-depth that with a well-made plan, you can practically get the game to play itself. Or at least you could in theory. More on that in a second. This planning system was completely abandoned after, I believe, Raven Shield, the third mainline Rainbow Six game, and despite inspiring dozens of tactical shooters, including the likes of SWAT 3 and 4, this planning phase mechanic was never used outside of the Rainbow Six games, save for my favorite CQC strategy franchise, Door Kickers, whose whole gameplay loop is basically just this planning screen. The main issues this menu faces are the time it takes not just to learn the mechanic, but also to make the plan and iterate on it. And that's not even mentioning the design of the UI. This menu makes zero sense to anyone who doesn't already know everything about it. I'm assuming the manual would have made this easier, but I went in completely blind and had to learn how to make an effective plan the hard way. One last criticism. A lot of these missions either have pre-made plans or are supposed to have them. The GOG version of the game has corrupted files, so I'm assuming most are missing. But the pre-made plans just made me more confused rather than forcing me to actually learn how to make a proper plan. Now, going into the gameplay, one thing is very apparent. The AI, both friendly and otherwise, is atrocious. Friendlies will stand out in the open while they throw flashbangs and grenades. They're very susceptible to getting shot when crossing doorways. You can't make them pie rooms or be cautious whatsoever. They are hard to wrangle and even harder to keep alive. Meanwhile, the enemy AI are practically always stationary, always facing you, and have inhuman reaction times. If you don't know an enemy is around a corner, there's a 50-50 chance that they react before you can. AI in a single-player tactical shooter is what makes or breaks an experience for me. If the AI is too dumb, it's not fun to fight. If it's too competent, it can feel borderline unfair. But to be honest, I think that the AI being bare bones is only a part of the problem. Now, gunplay isn't really a thing in Rainbow Six 1998. The gun is a tool more than a weapon. It is the primary tool used to finish an operation in this game, and it behaves unlike any other weapon you've ever used in a game before. When you press W, A, S, or D, your accuracy decreases massively, but as long as you stay moving in the same direction, it will stabilize again. But, and here's the part that fucked me up my entire time trying to play the game, even if you are just walking, the moment you stop moving, for example, to shoot an enemy, your accuracy will once again drastically decrease. This means if you are familiar with games where stopping movement will secure you a kill, like Arma 3, or Counter-Strike, or fucking every tactical shooter ever, you're in for a rude awakening. Once you get used to how the movement affects accuracy, it's easier to actually clear rooms. In fact, it basically incentivizes you to keep moving until the room is clear, something that modern CQC games don't even try to incentivize mechanically. The main issue with it, however, is that the AI squad mates don't really do much when you're on point. So instead, the most optimal strategy is to use solo clearing strategies, which the game penalizes your accuracy for attempting. The level design and pacing of the game is actually quite good. However, the GOG version I played, that being the only authentic version of the game that exists today, has lots of corruption. Several missions have bugged objectives, such as missing hostages. Other than that, however, each mission is unique, interesting, and competently designed, which complements the planning mechanic quite well. It's probably due to my grasp of mechanics becoming tighter as I played, but my favorite levels ended up being some of the bigger, more complex missions, such as the bomb defusal mission in Sydney, the HVT arrest, and the dam. Now, there is, however, a major exception to my praise of this game's level design, and that is the 2 forced stealth missions. Since the enemy AI already have insane vision and reaction times, the last thing this game needed was a stealth mission, especially one that boils down to trial and error. If an enemy sees even a sliver of you, which is very common as the AI are not designed for stealth gameplay, you fail the mission instantly. This alone brought the game down for me by quite a lot. It was just overall frustrating and not engaging or compelling. Rogue Spear, the sequel and glorified expansion pack for Rainbow Six 1998, would drop a year later and have similar insta-fail stealth missions, so evidently they didn't learn their lesson. Overall, the game isn't exactly bad. It has a lot of flaws, mostly due to the crunch the dev team faced, as well as the fact that nothing like this had ever been done before. I think that it succeeded at being what it wanted to be, that being a strategy-first shooter. Not only that, but the formula it created would be refined and iterated upon by not just other games, but other franchises in the Tom Clancy series. For example, Ghost Recon 2001 is very similar to Rainbow Six, but with major leaps and bounds in almost all areas. I think Rainbow Six's biggest flaws, and these apply to Rogue Spear and Raven Shield as well, is that 1. The AI is incredibly basic. AI is the cornerstone of a tactical experience. One of the biggest things that makes Ghost Recon better is that it's not committed to CQC environments. You see this with other franchises such as Arma as well. The AI doesn't have to be groundbreaking in an open environment, so long as they flank, move, and coordinate to some extent, they can be fantastic. AI in a CQC game has to be perfect, however. SWAT 4 gets close with reactive and responsive enemies and civilians, but Ready or Not fails on nearly all counts. Now, the other big issue I have is that the planning system isn't properly fleshed out. It's unfair to compare a game from 1998 to a game from 2020, but Door Kickers 2 is the perfected version of this system. The AI behaves and reacts almost identically to Rainbow Six's for all intents and purposes. They are stationary targets. Though, now that I think about it, Door Kicker's AI will still push and flank your operators on occasion, whereas Rainbow Six AI doesn't really try to push, take cover, or flank at any point during a fight. Door Kickers 2's planning phase has tools that allow you to make your units pie doorways, aim grenades and flashbangs, force them to watch one direction instead of just looking wherever they're moving to. Just lots of very good minor mechanics that make building a flawless CQC plan actually viable. In stark contrast, Rainbow Six 1998 doesn't have any of this, which means that on some of the more complicated maps, you will likely lose team members if you aren't meticulously planning every move and know every enemy placement. See, unlike Door Kickers, these maps are massive and multi-story, which means that trial and error is even more annoying and punishing. I don't want to hold this against the game too much, especially since it's a first draft of the concept, but it definitely feels like Rainbow Six 1998 was overly ambitious. Bad AI and an underdeveloped planning system in a game all about CQC just makes for a very frustrating gameplay experience. The next 2 entries in the series wouldn't improve on any of these aspects, and eventually the series would drop the planning phase altogether in favor of tactical CQC action instead of the meticulous planning phase followed by the action phase. I do believe that there is potential for a planning phase in games. Even if it's not about AI following a specific plan, my biggest gripe with Ready or Not, a game heavily inspired by SWAT 4, which was in turn inspired by Rainbow Six, is the lack of any real planning tools. You get a shitty floor plan map with no ability to tell where you're infilling from most of the time, and no way to draw any kind of plan out. Okay, technically you can draw a plan, but I don't think that you can draw it during the briefing, which is the main thing. Also, you'd have to open up your phone again to look at the map just to check the plan. 9 times out of 10, you're just winging everything. I'd love to see more games do what Due Process does, where the planning phase lets you not just draw on the map, but the drawings also show up in the levels so that you can follow the plan without having to check an external screen, mini-map, or God forbid, forget the plan completely. Anyways, I think it's time to wrap this up. Rainbow Six 1998 is a piece of gaming history. It does not deserve to be held to modern standards nor judged on a 10-point scale. I think it is deeply flawed, and it's not worth playing unless you are the exact type of person I am. That being someone who is deeply morally compelled to play old, broken, and downright unfun games just because they are important pieces of gaming history. The gameplay is crude, the AI equally so. The game only runs in 800 by 600, and the menu's mechanics and graphics are all difficult to adjust to. But it's brilliant in its very own ways. It was brave enough to try and build something new in a space dominated by the likes of Quake. My feelings about the game are conflicted. I do not like the game, but when it clicks, oh, it just clicks. I do not like the game, but the levels, narrative, and gameplay can be compelling. I don't like the game, but I see why so many people did, and why so many people still do. My name is GameReal, and I'm compelled to share my opinions about the things I like online. If you like stuff like this, well, you should already know what to do about it.